what I get for removing all my launcher settings. No more launcher settings. It does give me much faster loads though to wipe out my saves. But that shouldn't matter anymore. Only affects RTA. Once we have a couple of good runs with IGT and RTA, I'll probably change the leaderboards to have both. But we'll probably keep sorting by RTA for a while, until there's really need to sort by IGT. Which I don't think is going to be any time soon. My left debug code in my auto splitter. Oh, I'm not using the local copy anymore. Yes, it shouldn't matter. I guess I'll spend tonight working on Battle Block and Batman. Hello, Williamson. I got home on time for once, and then got distracted by GDQ, and then forgot to make dinner, and so I couldn't really start streaming until I had done that, which is why I'm late. It happens. I don't think, I mean, it's the advantage of not having an actual schedule. Doesn't matter when I start. As long as I start before like 9 o'clock, no one really cares. Oh, I did find a way of tracking audio logs now. That was something I figured out last night. Left 4 Dead 2? I was watching Left 4 Dead 2 run. Yes. I do like Valve games. And as much as I think those runners are terrible, the speedrun is something interesting. I personally prefer runs that are done on latest patch, and the fact that that run is done on old patch, like, solely for the purpose of a couple of dumb out-of-bounds skips. Play a drinking game. Every time they skip a level, take a drink. Yeah. Like, a lot of those skips got patched out, and especially as someone who played the game competitively, all of those skips were patched out for the competitive scene, because they were unfair. But the competitive scene sort of died. There wasn't, I mean, I don't want to say that. There are definitely people who still play the game competitively, even at a high level, but it's a lot smaller than it used to be. Should probably get in contact with Fig again. One of the devs on the competitive scene. I told him to contact me over the summer, but I wound up being really busy over the summer. But I realized I didn't ever tell him that I stopped being busy. I guess I could speedrun that game. Never played? It's a fun game. It definitely shows its age. Um, Not just in the way of like graphics quality, but in some of the balance ideas and some of the, I don't know. The overall design does not feel as clean as something like Counter-Strike, and it sort of did not get the long-term support that Counter-Strike got, and so it feels somewhat neglected. but that's sort of okay, because it's the sort of game that's designed to just be fun. It just feels like there are bits of it that were tacked on because why not? There's a lot of the level design that actually feels really bad, not just from like a it's buggy perspective, but from a like it's not balanced perspective. The game itself sort of isn't balanced, like expert mode. If you watch the speedrun, you may have seen them switch back and forth between easy and expert. Expert mode is just like generically you take 10 times the damage. It's not anything really harder, which is sort of, I don't know. I feel like it's a missed opportunity because there is dynamic routing in that game where they can add more stuff to make the game feel a bit fresher every time you play. In particular, that's designed for the co-op mode, the versus mode, excuse me, so that every single time you play a versus campaign, there is some slight flexibility in what happens. But again, it's just not very elegant because, well, it doesn't scale well. Like, well, I guess it's just not tied to difficulty. And that just feels wrong. It feels like a missed opportunity. It feels like also the sort of thing which I've seen custom map makers take really good advantage of. Where, like, the survivors can pick which direction they want to go. Longer with more weapons or shorter with, whatever. There's stuff like that. It's very neat. There's just a lot of design stuff that I feel like it's not bad, but it could have been done much better. And so when they said, or when they claimed they might, it's hard to express this idea. When there was a leak that reportedly came from Valve to do with them remastering the game, I was sort of sad because I'd much rather that they just released a new version of it rather than remastering it. Like, I don't mind the quality, I don't mind the graphics, I don't really care about the frame rate drops in places. What I care about is that the game could be improved. It's the same thing with TF2. Like, I love TF2. TF2 is a great game. TF2 is still a great game, but the ways they're innovating in TF2, although interesting, really would be better served by making another game. But they don't want to do that because they would probably lose their player base, which is very fair. TF2 has in the hundreds of thousands of active players, last report I saw, which is a lot, and I can understand them not wanting to just leave that player base out to dry. Yep. Attaboy. I'm wondering if I should get that bottom panel before going up to the top. I definitely could. Wouldn't cost me much. It would cost me a little bit of activation time, potentially. I think that was the reason I swapped the ordering for it. Oh, I didn't look into getting no board to display my mouse. Damn it. Something I should still look into, I guess. Desert is not going very well. Regardless of what my splits say, I'm making a bunch of mistakes in it. I Should be grabbing that switch a bit earlier. I can see it much more quickly. I'm just still scared of missing this cycle. Excuse me. No more sand snake EP, at least not right there. Hello, panel. Nice to meet you too. So I want to reset for the buoy. I guess I'll see how this time turns out. I once again have hidden my splits now that the splitter seems to be consistent, despite the mistake it made last time. I guess I should probably be running the debugger just to see if I can catch the mistake. I think that means I have to continue to do fast quarry. Which is definitely much less tight on the newer versions, but is still pretty tight. And I guess I should change my splits too after my next successful run. And my elbows. Both getting tired. Don't know why. Oh yeah, no, I know exactly why. It's a very good reason for it. It's very dumb. Very fast. The fast. I think we tried to snipe that panel and it wasn't possible from the ground. I don't really remember though. Shouldn't really matter. I'm so used to mashing and going to the left. I don't know why. Yeah, I have to do them both equally, of course, but somehow the leftward one is the instinct, not the rightward one. Maybe it's because I feel like I'm under more time pressure going to the left than when I go to the right. Though, of course, the game's paused in both circumstances, so there's never any time pressure. Williamson, that transfer to the background is often what's very hard at speed without highest mouse sensitivity, because you have to make 3 transfers in quick succession, and the last one, often you can run out of mouse space because you have to do it very, very quickly. So that's why I like highest sense for this. I could, but I prefer the consistency, and since when the game is paused, none of the internal cycles run, it doesn't affect my ability to get that buoy, the buoy EP that's coming up, so it doesn't really matter. If I was in really heavy competition about it, I would try and save those 10 seconds, but I don't think it's that important for a run this long. But yeah, Williamson does it, that's what I was talking about. I have no idea what my buoy cycle is. I have to hope I make it. Wow. Okay. Talk about close. No, again, I believe it's possible. If, like, no offense to Walma, but if he was pushing me for time, then I would probably have to look into small time saves like that. But as far as time saves go, higher quality play is a much bigger deal than small little optimizations. And so not making mistakes and having to reset over them is really nice. Yeah, that cycle is going to be a reset point going forward. It should always be possible. Just requires high quality play for the first half of the game. And by high quality, I mean good, not my absolute best. My absolute best would probably be about 15 seconds early, maybe a bit more. to right click there. But that was a little bit closer than I usually like to cut it. Definitely. Folks will have to let me know if the splitter breaks again on the CP like it did last time. I don't know why it would, I'm just making sure. So I will undo some splits. My assumption though is that it's a fluke. "19 cycle is my reset? Yep. I don't know the exact cycle timing, but whatever cycle that is, I'll know, because now if I'm not getting the cycle, it means that I'm too slow. Before I was using the 1950, but I'm pretty sure I can beat that now, so. Well, very sure that I can beat it, given that I have 3 times now. Looks good for splits. Glad to hear it. I'm going to mostly just assume that whatever happened was a fluke, and that I don't have to worry about it. I wonder if I can corner snipe that. If so, I should. It'd be a lot easier. Excuse me. Now, let's not forget keep 4. That was pretty dumb last time. Next element of concern is the couch EP. The boat snipe for couch EP. Trying to make use of reversing momentum there a little bit more. I think it's actually very helpful to back up and hit forward rather than to turn your mouse around. On this version, unlike in previous versions, if you take a step backward and a step forward, you don't have to go down to 0 momentum to do that. It'll carry your momentum. So if you're going at full speed and you start backing up, you'll go backwards at full speed. Or very close to it. Up, then down, then all the way left. Just trying to minimize mouse pickups there. Should also be using the better solution for that. I don't, just because I'm bad at remembering it, but it just saves a corner, basically. Yeah, the boat snipe sucks. I'm slowly getting better at it, but probably I may just have to grind out some practice for it, because it's hard. It's a very precise click, and it's very precise movement. And I just don't want to have to deal with that more than necessary. Like, a lot of it's going to come down to feeling, because again, the lineup I'm using is to do with the center of the circle, and there is no obvious center of the circle. It just has to feel like the center. I missed my stream. It's okay. You're not required to make every stream as much as you like to. I looked up to check my splits. I can't see my splits. But I presumably didn't lose time because I didn't screw it up, so. Just a note, anyone who's not familiar with me hiding my splits, I'm hiding my splits because I don't want to know how far ahead I am. So, please don't tell me unless I ask. Thank you. Enjoy having this secret knowledge over me of how well I'm doing. Trust me that I will know if I make a serious mistake. And I will be upset about it. I just won't know how much time it loses until I check later. Challenge is one of the few places where I can't estimate my time loss. Just because it is so intense and I don't really have a good handle on how long challenge takes. All I'll really be able to tell is a first song clear or not. And I almost always get that, so... hard to say. Snipes didn't lose me time? Yeah, I know. I had a really slow snipe in my PB. I guess I don't really have to delay on the start point as long as I do. But I'm a scared boy. I don't want to miss it. It's a very big time loss if you do. Sure. A little bit of frame dropping here actually. I think it's because mountain's visible. Only getting 35 up there as I solve that front panel. I guess that's the other advantage of solving it where we do an any percent. Is that it's, you don't have the mountain loaded. So you can't, so you don't lose time from it being rendered. Because you're looking up, not out, I guess. Oops. Not quite the right angle there, but shouldn't matter a lot. Let's use the right side of the door. Almost forgot which spot I was supposed to turn at because I'm not usually covering that bit of the puzzle. Panel, whatever. The reason I like door skip is because there's a long activation delay between those two panels. And so it's nice to have some walking time in between them, which I don't think you do with Walma's route. But Walma's route also is able to take advantage of the walking time between panels. I think it's 3 and 4, which also have a long delay. So There are definitely merits to each. I still think this is faster. If only because of walking distance. Like, you start the back panel at about the same time if you go forward or backward, but if you go backward, you don't have to walk as far to get to the next panel. And you're able to line up properly for all the remaining panels. 1, 1, 2, 1. 3, 3, 4, 4. Inside and outside. 1, 1, 2, 1. 2, 2, excuse me. It's not really where I usually solve that from, but it worked, so no complaints. Okay. A little bit too far even for the new version. Okay, laser, then sand snake, then windmill. I'm gonna have to put in an extra split for the first panel in windmill, which is fine. God, that's so much easier, I swear. Just not having to turn around for it, along with it being, you know, at a reasonable angle, as opposed to usually when you solve it, you're at the same elevation, which is just not fun.
And so
or you. This stuff's easy to fix.
Did I PB yesterday? No. I had 2 runs, one of which failed, one of the, okay. 2 runs, one of which failed one of the windmill EPs, which meant that it was extremely far behind in the post game. And one run that was doing okay, made a couple of mistakes, and then had a terrible challenge. And so both of those turned into 99.8 practice runs. Actually, the second run forgot panel in treehouse, so it wouldn't have worked anyways. Come on. Wouldn't have worked. Wouldn't have been valid, I guess, is more accurate there. Okay. Game does not want to have any of it right now. Didn't update my PB? Yeah, that's a good indicator. Though I don't always update my PB on Speedrun.com, just because that does take real effort. I have to highlight the video for 100%. I usually like to export it to YouTube because Twitch VODs that are very long tend to buffer very poorly, and it's really a pain to have to seek through a Twitch VOD. Seeking through YouTube is much easier. Seek, look at me using a tape term. Actually, is that even a record term? I don't know. You don't have to seek physically anymore. It's now more digitally seeking, as in I am seeking the answer. Top of the stairs, how about? Oh, I'm probably safe to do it at the bottom. Okay, let's do it at the top. Just because I don't feel like failing it. So any percent, I don't mind as much, and in general, runs that aren't very high quality, I don't mind as much, just because the only reason I'm ever going to watch an old run, and there are absolutely reasons I will watch an old run, but the only reason I'm going to watch an old run is just for, like, checking how did I do this before, or how did this challenge go, or let's see, let me time something, some time save versus some old strat. That's why I'll watch an old VOD. And for those things, I don't care how easy it is to seek through it. But for the latest run, when I want to show someone a strat, when there's some new players like, oh, how do you do town? And I can say, oh, let me just link you to my town in YouTube. It's much easier for me to do that, and I assume easier for them to watch if, oh, right, you don't leave. That's what's throwing me. You're supposed to walk down the stairs and then not leave. Hadn't thought of it that way. It's just much easier to handle if it's on YouTube, which is why I do that. And for any record runs I ever get, I will always export them to YouTube because same reason. This is what someone's going to look at. I want what they look at to be easy to find and easy to look up. In general, YouTube has a higher SEO, search engine optimization, than Twitch does, for the obvious reason of Google owns YouTube. So they're a little bit biased. But also for the reason of YouTube is the more popular service, right? My mother knows what YouTube is. My mother probably has not seen... Well, that's not true. My mother's a bad example because I'm a speedrunner. But your average person does not know what Twitch is. But your average person does know what YouTube is. So YouTube is the more popular site. See if I make this cycle without any effort. No effort at all. Trivial, even. Actually, what I should do is I should skip here. Alright. Now, to not fail the thing I failed 2 runs ago. Which involves me leaning in very close to my monitor so that I can see what's going on. I think if you are above the blade, so if you think about this carefully, when you are above the intersection, or I guess as the blade intersects with the path, it should push you down, right? Because it's forming an acute angle. And so if you're above where you're trying to go to, the blade should push you down, and then when the connection is available, it should lock you in. Whereas if you're below, I'm pretty sure it'll just keep pushing you down and you'll miss. I would like to test that theory, but that's my current suspicion as to why that feels easier sometimes than others. If it's consistent, then that trick will be a lot easier to pull off, because I'll just always stay above the intersection and I'll always get it at basically the same time. Okay. The way you know if you've solved a panel, and this goes for any panel in the entire game. Okay, this goes for almost any panel in the entire game. A panel is solved if when you left click to exit the panel, it brings you out of solve mode. So the white border around your screen disappears. That's how you know you solved the panel. And so you can use that, because if you don't snap out of that mode, you know you didn't actually solve it. Now this is only true the first time you solve a panel, but that Desert Laser redirect snipe, it's a little bit inconsistent. It feels like it's gotten more consistent for me lately. I definitely think putting my cursor below the redirect panel before I start it helps. No. Regardless, I think it's gotten more consistent, but that's how you know if it worked or not. If it doesn't snap you out, then you were like a pixel too high and it did not work. This EP is very generous and I should be taking advantage of it. This EP is not, and I should be killing it. Oh, I'm surprised. I thought this was some of the good GDQ runs, but I guess that's an opinion. And I guess people are happy to watch me, or maybe they're multitasking. Actually, let's go with that. I'm going to assume people are multitasking. I don't want to think that I'm taking away viewers, even if they're very few from GDQ. GDQ is a wonderful thing. They have problems, but everyone has problems. And they're at least trying to do something good. And that's the important thing. A lot of it is more about raising awareness than it is about necessarily generating revenue to solve anything. But just like making it clear how many walks of life, how many different kinds of people all have the same reaction. This is the disadvantage. I don't know where I am for Cloud Cycle. I'm going to assume I get it here. I guess means I should move my splits, actually. Alright, okay, so two things to change are, actually, I mentioned something in town, too. I don't remember what it was. You've already donated, you've already seen Dying Light. Okay, I like watching Fun Cannon, which is why I'm gonna go watch Dying Light after this. In like 2.5 hours or whatever. But, I like Fun Cannon, I like Emerlin. Both of them are really good BL2 runners. Even if though I don't think Fun Cannon really runs BL2 very much anymore. Oh, I'm early. Wow. Okay. Sure. Fine. Whatever. Yeah, okay, so I need to move those splits. I want to move the splits for Fast Quarry. In fact, I think I want to rename some of the splits in Desert. Let's see, what else do I need to do? I want to see if it's possible to get Bunker, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no. I think that would be way too tight, even for me, to get all of Bunker within a minute, and then run up the mountain. Okay, no, I guess I ran up the mountain, so I would have had to get all of Bunker from that moment in a minute. I don't think that works. I'm not certain. That just seems really, really tight. Plus, there's a little bit of extra time spent leaving Bunker. Like, maybe in the far future. Or maybe I could drop a Windmill EP. Actually, that'd be a very simple thing to do. Drop a Windmill EP, do all of Bunker. But fundamentally, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I catch the Cloud Cycle at a convenient time. It doesn't actually matter how much I do before and after. Though, possibly? No. I actually like doing the windmill at the beginning. I like doing windmill EPs at a constant offset to when you start the windmill. Because otherwise, you basically fall victim to RNG of the challenge. How quickly you do the challenge, and I guess the intervening like hour and a half of the run dictates what your windmill cycle is. I could definitely start trying to predict it during Eclipse. That wouldn't even be that hard to do, but I don't really care that much right now. It doesn't really cost you time. You just check it the moment you leave, and if it's off, then you're not losing time, so. Phone. That's not what my phone sounds like. Actually, it's kind of funny. My phone's ringtone is the tank noise from Left 4 Dead, the tank soundtrack. The logic being it was a game I played a lot, and that sound got sort of ingrained in my consciousness. And hearing that sound in Left 4 Dead, or Left 4 Dead 2, I guess, is your cue that, oh my god, pay attention, because you're going to die. So it's a very good sound to use to force you to pay attention. It absolutely does. Took a minute door to door. Well, okay, so I could try dropping one of the two windmill blades and doing that, but again, I don't think it's necessary. I guess if my runs start getting really considerably faster, then I'll start doing that. No, it wouldn't even have to be much faster. I lost like 5 seconds there due to waiting. Okay. It's just scary to have to catch it at the end of the cycle. I guess I'll look back at this run and see how many mistakes I made in the pregame. If I think I could realistically save another 10 seconds, which to be honest, I probably could, then I will go for it at that moment, rather than where I did just now. But that's a big question mark, and I don't want to put too much pressure on resetting for this run. I really hate having to reset for Cloud Cycle. It's a really dumb thing to have to lose a run to. It's one of the disadvantages, unfortunately, of not being able to see my splits, which is why I'd much rather take a consistency and a bit of a time loss than try to save maybe 5 seconds. the trick for that second Moss EP seems to be clicking in early. If you click in too late, you can walk too far forward. But I haven't yet clicked in too early, provided it slid me into position. But I guess that's the trick. So I guess the point I'm making is it's easier to judge when you aren't quite there yet, but it's much harder to judge when you're too far. Because when you're not quite there yet, the circle isn't formed. When you're too far, the circle is formed. It's just that the thing you aren't looking at isn't in position. Knowing what's going on with the thing you're not looking at is hard. Okay, swamp sliding bridge. And then the only big challenge in the run is, well, challenge. Like, mountain can go wrong, random doors can go wrong, but challenge is really the only thing that is going to lose me significant amounts of time. I lost 2 minutes on it last run. It's pretty bad. I probably need to practice it more, but really, in my book, the best way to practice it is in a run, because otherwise it's very hard to approximate the level of physical and mental exhaustion that I get to after, like, an hour of a run. Like, I'm well aware that I'm ahead at this point, because I got Cloud Cycle and I was early to Cloud Cycle, which did not happen last time. So... panic is not really a concern at this point, because if I was going to be panicking, I would be panicking. Whoa! Okay, I guess the rule is don't move. 20 challenge? Well, I mean, that's why that category exists, because it's a good way of approximating the level of physical exhaustion you get. So I may do another 20 challenges run if this challenge goes poorly, just because that is a good way to practice. Because that's all about consistency and endurance. So once again, with snipes, I know I've solved the snipes because the second snipe, not the first one, because when I solve the second snipe, it locks me out of solve mode, or it snaps me out of solve mode, which is really nice. All right, lag panels, just 4 of them, and then 4 more later. I should try doing a run at medium, or I guess I should try entering this area at medium and see how bad the lag is. Probably not terrible. Hard to say, actually. I guess I get a bit of lag here, too. Yeah. Okay. Definitely feels like the game slows down, but I think the timer will compensate for it now, which is good. Timer is using pure game time. There's basically 2 floats in the game, one of which deals with game time, one of which is like the number of seconds since you booted the game, and one of which is the last moment at which you restarted the game. And so I can use those 2 in combination. Actually, I don't. No, I just keep track of the last moment when the run started. Hello, Pinback. Hello, Master Procrastinator. Yeah, splits are hidden. I know I'm ahead, I don't know by how much. My suspicion is it's a fair bit. I think it's close to a minute at this point. Alright. Slight reordering here is snipe first, then panels, and more lag. Yeah, definitely gonna try a run on medium tomorrow, see if it's better. I don't like going to lowest. There are some things that are actually really bad on lowest, but medium is still pretty reasonable. My heart doesn't know that the splits are hidden. It's insistent on beating up a storm. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Skip. I will come back for you. Taking a bit of a time loss here. Undo. You play on medium? Do you get lag in this area when you look at the mountain? I'm currently floating 35. Sure. I thought I was in the exit. I guess not. I normally get 160 or so, which is why it's particularly noticeable for me. Because I'm dropping below 60, which is really where jittering starts to occur. Not that you notice. Alright, I will try that tomorrow. And yes, there will be a run tomorrow, no matter how good this run is. There will be a run the day after and Friday, no matter how good this run is. Day after being Thursday. When I say I'm going to run a game for a week, I mean it. Ow. Back, please. Stop doing this. My back is informing me kindly that it would be much happier if I was in a horizontal position, and I'm informing it also kindly that it needs to be upright for a little while longer. Approximately an hour and a half. Maybe a bit less, actually. Maybe I'm supposed to solve that panel, then get into position? I'm not really certain. The idea is that I'm supposed to be able to start that EP without having to change my view, which I think is possible, but probably doesn't align well with also solving that first panel. So I think I should solve the first panel, then move my view. Okay, so 2 things to change right now. May become more, depending on what it goes. I thought there was something I wanted to swap up in town, or maybe that was just practice that I wanted to swap up. I've been doing some manual skips and undos, so I'm hoping I haven't screwed up the count of those either. I don't think I have. Hard to say. So I need to skip 2 splits after bunker laser. And then you all can see how much time I'm ahead or behind at vault, which is the equalizer. I should be, again, about 30 to 40 ahead. What am I doing? I have no idea. I should see if I can hack the 2 floodgates closed. I don't think anything will come of it, but I think it would be kind of cute. Or no, I can already do that. The only thing you can't do is have them both open, because then you would potentially soft lock. Or the theory is that you might soft lock, but you can actually get them from the rocks, which I guess means getting them from the rocks isn't really intended. You can stand right here and you can actually see this panel, or the start point here and the end point there. Otherwise you have to be able to walk to it to actually solve the panel. There are many people watching me. Hello all of you. Please don't mind lurking. I don't mind it. Enjoy the video game. Second solve. Alright. I used to have an alignment here, but I keep second guessing it, so. Alright, skip 2 splits. And then there's going to be a time here on the mountainside vault. 3, up 3. I guess over 3 and then up 3, whatever. So whatever that time is real. I am legitimately that far ahead now. There was a bit of confusion earlier to do with the cloud cycle, which I've moved because I was going to be way too early for it up here. But we should be all set now. Too far onto the Crazy Horse. Yes, this puzzle is called Crazy Horse. Why? You know, honestly, I've never asked. Let's do this thing. Interesting. I'm like, did I miss something? No, you just have to wait a second for bunker. So maybe it's faster to go around the back now? No, can't be. That's only like a second delay in going around the front versus the back is 14. Just surprising to know that I can actually beat that. All the 3 days I knew about it? Wait, knew about what? What are you talking about? Oh, Crazy Horse. I've never asked. Yeah. Never is still correct. Just never usually implies a longer timeline than it legitimately is. So. To be fair, I saw references to it in the code earlier, like a week and a half ago. I just didn't know what they were. So it's sort of comforting to know now. It's just a bit dumb. I don't think I ever responded to that Steam thread. I probably should become the man of knowledge. But people tend to theory craft way too much in those Steam threads for my liking. Which I guess in general, people theory craft about this game a lot. It's sort of, I don't know, I like what Jonathan Blow had to say, which is he said it's very humbling and also very frustrating for someone to say, I love your game so much, there must be more to it. Right, like people creating conspiracy theories about the hidden stuff in your game. It's like, I guess, but like there wasn't that much hidden in Braid. Like, not that there weren't hidden things in Braid, but you got the stars. That was the hidden stuff in Braid. Okay. It wasn't very, very hidden. It was just hidden. There was nothing super secret. At least I don't recall there being anything super secret in Braid. Let's try not to forget the purple panel. Purple EP, excuse me. I still wish that it was faster to solve the orange side first, but it isn't for a couple of reasons. One of them, the simplest, is that it is just 2 extra movements from forward to back, but the other is that the orange strat is the one that involves the most manipulations, the most distance on the pathway, and it's really, really frustrating to have to like walk back and forth that extra distance. But it might be possible to take a little bit of extra time at the beginning to set up the orange path to be a bit of a longer route, but I don't recall that being practical. I guess I can take another look, but I don't recall it working. Might be worth trying, but probably does not work. Basically, the setup would be you'd need to get... No, I don't even know if that would be practical. Alright, random doors. Didn't practice you at all today, so... No, wrong. I cornered out the wrong spot. Bit sketchy on the second door, but good enough. God damn it, boat. Give me a heart attack every time. Also, wow, this panel is terrible. Fortunately, in this category, it doesn't actually matter how quickly you solve the pillars, because you don't wait on the elevator directly, but I was still pretty bad. Let's not mince words here. I lost like 5 seconds. Oh no, 5 seconds. Yes, 5 seconds. So that beam there is solid, but this ground isn't, because I don't know. Why would you ever bother trying? I don't actually know. Like, all that tells me is that my mountain went pretty well, but I know my mountain went pretty well. I can see that my mountain went pretty well because nothing went wrong. Like, that's just observable. But I think sending the boat such that words are failing me. Sending the boat such that it doesn't go around the extra loop would probably make it so the boat arrives mid-elevator, which is a much more comforting time, rather than mid-floor panel. And I also don't think the boat's going to listen to me very much. It's not a very cooperative boat. That, or I could send it around an extra loop at, like, symmetry, and that would probably make it, arrive when I was taking the elevator up. Because it takes, like, a minute. It hits during pillars, right? Yeah. So, yeah, a minute would be good enough. I'm sorry for running in circles. I hope it doesn't make anyone nauseous. It's just that I'm tremendously bored. Extra 1x1s. I have always solved that panel 3 times, because sometimes I miss one of them, and I solve it 2 times, and that's the scariest thing, because that means that if that one time that I missed it was the first time, then I would not have gotten the panel. I know someone early on missed a 100% run because of that panel, and so I now just take no risks, because I don't need to. So I always solve it one way going down, one way going up, and then one way going down again. And they're different solves, so I can see if I ever solve it the same direction twice in a row, which would be first and third, or if the first time I solve it is on the way up, then both of those would mean I missed it. I won't notice if I miss it on the way down the third time, but of course then it doesn't matter. So. I've done this enough times lately that I actually remember the solution to that second one, which is good. No sandwiches, thank you. I don't like sandwiches. If you ever see me with a sandwich, why would you think I want a sandwich? I also don't like coffee. Could get me a drink of water. Those are never remiss. Apparently my UTM was bad in TV, so I should be saving another 30 seconds here. A lot of that was to do with me just not being familiar with the new panel movement. I was still getting that PB when I was not yet used to this new version. Basically, PB was my first 100% run that didn't screw anything up. Not quite. Sure, whatever. I need to be less stingy on the right-hand side there. Doesn't matter. Stingy. Careful. Aggressive. Words that I use to represent my puzzle solves that don't really make sense. Up 2, right 2, down 2, up 3, left 2. Right 1, up 2, right. I just wish there was a snipe for one of those UTM panels. That would be so cool. It would make all lasers a much more interesting category. Or, I guess, a much more fun category. Because the way all lasers is currently defined... Actually, no, I think that's not true. Okay, the way all lasers would have to be defined is get all 11 lasers, which again, I think is how it works now. But it would also be interesting to see a category that's just complete the challenge, no other requirements, where you did a skip in it. Again, not that we know of any skip, just there are shortcut panels. Potentially one of them would have been grabbable from outside. The snipes in this game, I hate to say that they feel deliberate, because Swamp Snipe definitely does not, but in general, the snipes in this game feel pretty obvious. Like, definitely the shadow snipe is something that Jonathan knew about at the time. Like, it's too obvious not to realize. And the fact that, like, it got harder in the latest version, but is not impossible. The same thing happened with Swamp Snipe at some point. Those things are suspicious, to say the least. Where it's like, oh, I'm well aware that people do this trick, but I don't want to make it impossible. Whereas, like, Keep Skip, I can understand getting patched out, because that is really just a glitch. That's not like a clever solution, that's just, you're skipping part of the puzzle, please stop. Whereas, like, what we do for panel 3, or pressure plate 3, is a clever solution. It is not doing anything illegal by the grounds of the game, it's just skipping some part of the panel that you're not really expected to. Okay, I have to manual split here. That was a really terrible maze. Made up for it with a really good black and white stones. Alt 252223. Yeah, 252223. Terrible ordering, but it is what it is. Could have been a much worse ordering, actually. Those last two were okay. 252223. No. Maybe. No. Yes. Oh, was it Alt? I think it was. I think it has to be that. No, it could be this. 5 222. Okay, this is 3. What the hell? Game felt generous. Holy cow. No, that's not right. the 2 panels. These dots are here and here. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I have to section off the black dots then. Okay. What do we skip at pressure plate 3? The solution where you back up onto the pressure plates and then reset allows you to bypass one of the pressure plates that's right at the entrance, which is not part of the EP solution. And that's why we have to redo a reset there. Otherwise, there is a perfectly valid solution that you can do with that pressure plate active, but it's not part of the EP solution. Here's to hoping I didn't forget anything. If I did, I will be somewhat sad. $599.
Working in had seen better days. At one time, it had been near the center of a thriving commercial district.
Okay.
But like so many other New England cities,
I need to
the
stretch for a
advent
bit.
of shopping malls had, by the early 70s,
1 sec.
turned it into a ghost town. Worcester's solution to this problem was decisive, to say the least. The city's elders apparently decided that if they couldn't beat them, they would join them. And so, several square blocks at the heart of the city were bulldozed into oblivion, destroying dozens of family businesses, including the site of a pharmacy once operated by my great-grandfather. In their place was erected a vast 3-level shopping complex with cinemas and a food court. When the dust settled, only a few forlorn blocks of the old Worcester remained standing. My Radio Shack store was in one of those blocks. Then, to add insult to injury, Radio Shack opened a brand new location inside the shopping center, less than 500 feet from my store. So now patrons had a choice between a clean, well-lighted establishment with uniformed security and acres of convenient parking, or a shadowy hole in a seedy old office building next to an adult movie theater. Consequently, I had plenty of time to fool around with the new computer. I taught myself basic programming. Then I learned Z80 assembly. Both, of course, so that I could write games. I also created self-running animated demos, which ran all night in the store window for the edification of the winos who peed in our doorway. Strangely enough,
Hello,
the
frenzied
few
coder.
customers we had didn't seem
Yes,
to be
this is a
interested
pretty good
in our
run.
new computer.
Alright.
Even
Insert to mute the game. Muted in my headphones. And I have a wonderful book here. And I'm going to keep reading. I think I'm not going to bother with historical summaries. If you have questions about what's going on, ask them in chat. I'll take a break every few pages whenever there's a segment. And I'll try and do my best to answer them. It's just going to take too long to start going through the history. I will tell you, our primary character is called Malcolm. He is an up-and-coming spy. Chapter 6. Glazing Sprigs. Malcolm decided to tell his parents about the scholar whose book he'd returned, and about her offer to lend him others so that he wouldn't be hiding anything except the most important thing of all. He showed his mother the first 2 books as she dished up the lamb stew that was his supper. The Body in the Library, she read, and A Brief History of Time. Don't bring him to the kitchen, though. They'll get all spotted with grease and gravy. If someone lends you something, you have to look after it. I'll keep him in my bedroom, said Malcolm, tucking him back in the knapsack. Good. Now hurry up. It's busy tonight. Malcolm sat down to his supper. Mom, he said, when I leave Overcoat Elementary, am I going to senior school? Depends what your dad says. What do you think he'd say? I think he'd say to eat your supper. I can eat and listen at the same time. Pity I can't talk and cook then. The next day, the nuns were busy and Mr. Taphouse was at home, so Malcolm had no excuse to go to the priory. Instead, he lay in his bedroom reading the books one after the other, and then when it stopped raining, he went out to see if it was dry enough to paint the boat's name in his new red paint, but it wasn't. So he went moodily back to his bedroom and set about making a lanyard with his cotton cord. During lunchtime, he carried drinks and food to customers in the bar as usual, and when he was attending to the fire, he happened to see something that surprised him. Alice, the washer-up, came into the bar with two handfuls of clean tankards, and was leaning forward to put them on the bar when one of the men sitting nearby reached out and pinched her bottom. Malcolm held his breath. Alice didn't show the slightest reaction at first, but made sure the glasses were safely on the bar before she turned around. "Who done that?" she said calmly, but Malcolm could see that her nostrils were flared and her eyes narrowed. None of the men moved or spoke. The man who had pinched her was a plump, middle-aged farmer called Arnold Hemsley, whose demon was a ferret. Alice's demon, Ben, had become a bulldog, and Malcolm could hear his quiet growl, and saw the ferret trying to hide in the man's sleeve. "Next time that happens," Alice said, "I won't even try to find out who has done it. I'll just glass the nearest one of you." And she took out a tankard by the handle and smashed it on the bar, leaving a jagged edge of the handle in her bony fist. The shards of glass fell on the stone floor in silence. "What happened here?" said Malcolm's father, arriving at the kitchen. "Someone made a mistake," said Alice, and she tossed the broken handle into Hemsley's lap. He pulled away in alarm, tried to catch it, and cut himself. Alice walked away indifferently. Malcolm, crouching in the fireplace with the poker in his hand, heard Hemsley and his friends muttering together, "She's too young, you bloody fool. She wants to watch herself. It was a stupid thing to do. She ain't old enough. Deliberately provoking me. She wasn't. Ain't you got no sense? Leave her alone. She's an old Tony Parslow's girl." But his father told him to sweep up the broken glass before he could hear any more, and the men soon stopped talking about it anyway, because all anyone really wanted to talk about was the rain and what had to be done and what it had been doing to the water levels. The reservoirs were full, and the river board had to release a lot of water into the river and keep the sluice gates open. Several meadows were flooded around Oxford and Abingdon, Abingdon, Abingdon. But that was nothing unusual. The trouble was that the water wasn't draining away, and further down the river a number of villages were under threat. Malcolm wondered whether to make notes of all this in case it was important, but he decided not to. There'd be conversations like this in every pub on every river in the kingdom. It was strange, though. "Mr. Anscombe," he said to one of the watermen. "What's that, Malcolm? Has it ever been as wet as this before?" "Oh, yeah. You take a look at the lockkeeper's house in Duke's Cut. On the walls there they've got a board showing how high the water came in the floods of— when was it, Doogie?" "It was 1883, said his companion. "No, more recent than that." "Then 52, was it? Or 53?" "Something like that. Every 40, 50 years or so there's a monstrous flood. They ought to get it sorted out by now." "What could they do, though?" said Malcolm. "Dig more reservoirs," said Doogie. "There's always a demand for water." "No, no," said Mr. Anscombe. "The problem is the river. They ought to dredge it proper. You see them dredgers at work by Wallingford, little flimsy things. There ain't man enough for the job. They'd be swept away themselves if a really big flood come along. Holy cow, this English is hard to read. They'd be swept along themselves if a really big flood come along. The problem is when you get a big mass of water coming down off the hills, it's held up by the riverbed not being deep enough, and it spreads out instead. If they ain't taken precautions past Abingdon already," said Doogie, "they bloody oughter be. All them villages down there, they're all vulnerable. See, if they dug 2 or 3 big reservoirs higher up, then the water wouldn't be wasted either. It's a precious resource, water." "Yeah, it would be in the Sahara Desert," said Mr. Anscombe. "But what you gonna do? Send it there by post? There's no shortage of water in England. It's the river depth that's the problem. Dredge it all out proper, and it'll flow down to the sea like good as gold." "The land's too level this side of the Chilterns," said someone else, and began to explain more, but Malcolm was called away to take some beer to the conservatory room. The first thing that Malcolm heard that was worth reporting came not from the Trout, but from Ulvercote Elementary School. Long periods of rain were the teachers' despair, as children couldn't go out and teachers had to supervise indoor play, and everybody became frustrated and fretful. In the crowded, noisy, stuffy playtime classroom, Malcolm and 3 friends had turned 2 desks around, back to back, and were playing a form of table football. But Eric's demon had some exciting and mysterious news that Eric wasn't trying very hard to suppress. "What? What?" said Robbie. "I'm not supposed to say," said Eric virtuously. "Well, just say it quietly," said Tom. "It's not legal to say it. It's against the law." "Who told you, then?" "My dad, but he told me not to repeat it." Eric's father was the clerk of the country court, and often passed on news of particularly juicy trials to Eric, whose popularity increased in proportion. "Your dad's always saying that," Malcolm pointed out, "but you always tell us anyway." "No, this is different. This is really secret." "He shouldn't have told you then," said Tom. "He knows he can trust me," said Eric, to a chorus of jeers. You know you are going to tell us, said Malcolm, so you might as well do it before the bell goes. Eric made a great performance of looking around and leaning in close. They all leaned in too. You know there was that man who fell in the canal and drowned, he said. Robbie had heard about it. Tom hadn't, and Malcolm just nodded. Well, there was his inquest on Friday, Eric went on, and everybody thought he'd drowned, but it turned out he was strangled before his body entered the water. So he never fell in. He was murdered first, and then the murderer chucked him in the canal. Wow, said Robbie. How'd they know these things? Said Tom. There was no water in his lungs, and there was marks on his neck where the rope had been. So what's going to happen next? Said Malcolm. Well, it's a police case now, said Eric. I don't suppose we'll hear any more till they catch the murderer and he goes on trial. At that point, the bell went, and they had to put their game away and turn their desks around and settle down, sighing heavily, to French. Malcolm made straight for the newspaper when he got home, but there was no mention of the body in the canal. The body in the library, however, was gripping, and he finished it after he was supposed to put his light out. It was a good deal less horrible, somehow, despite the violence done to the victim in the book, than the thought of that poor man who had lost the acorn, unhappy, frightened, and finally strangled to death. One that one Once that thought had got a hold of Malcolm, he had found it hard to struggle loose. If only he and Asta had offered to help at once, they would have found the acorn, the man would have gotten away quickly, the CCD men wouldn't have arrested him, he'd still be alive. On the other hand, the CCD men might have been watching all the time. They might have been going to arrest him whatever happened. It was the loneliness of his death that upset Malcolm most. After school the next day, Malcolm went to the Priory to see how the baby was. The answer was that she was fine, and currently asleep, and no, he couldn't see her. But I've got a present for her, said Malcolm to Sister Benedicta, who was working in the office. Sister Fenella was busy elsewhere, apparently, and couldn't see him. Well, that's very kind of you, Malcolm, said the nun, and if you give it to me, I'll make sure she gets it. Thank you, said Malcolm, but maybe I'll leave it till I can give it to her myself. As you please. Is there anything I can do while I'm here? No, not today, thank you, Malcolm. Everything's fine. Sister Benedicta, he persisted, when they were deciding whether to put the baby here, was it the ex-Lord Chancellor who decided? Lord Nugent? He had a part in the decision, yes, she said. Now, what's the Lord Chancellor's job? He's one of the chief law officers of the Crown. He's the Speaker of the House of Lords. Why was it his job to decide about this baby, then? There must be loads of babies. If he had to decide where each one of them should go, he wouldn't have time to do anything else. I'm sure you're right, she said. But that's the way it was. Her parents are important people, mind you. That had happened to some... That had something to do with it. And I hope you haven't been talking about it. It's supposed to be confidential. It's certainly private. Now, Malcolm, I really must get these accounts in order before Vespers. Off you go. We'll talk another day. She'd said everything's fine, but it wasn't. Sister Fenella should have been cooking by now, and there were sisters he didn't know very well hurrying along the corridors, looking anxious. He worried about the baby, but Sister Benedicta always told the truth. All the same, it was troubling. Malcolm went outside into the drizzle of the dark evening, and saw a warm light glowing in the workshop. Mr. Taphouse, the carpenter, must still be there. He knocked on the door and went in. What are you making, Mr. Taphouse? He said. What's it look like? Looks like windows. That one looks like the kitchen window, except... No, they're going to be shutters. Is that right? That's it. Feel the weight of that, Malcolm. The old man stood the kitchen window-shaped frame upright in the middle of the floor, and Malcolm tried to lift it. Blimey, that's heavy. 2-inch oak all around. Add the weight of the shutter itself, and what'll you have to be sure of? Malcolm thought. The fixing in the wall, it'll have to be really strong. It's going inside or out? Outside. There's nothing but stone to fix it to there. How are you going to do that? Mr. Taphouse winked and opened a cupboard. Inside, Malcolm saw a new piece of machinery, surrounded by coils and heavy wire flex. And barrack drills, said the carpenter. You want to give me a hand? Sweep up for me. He closed the cupboard and handed Malcolm a broom. The floor was thick with shavings and sawdust. Why, Malcolm began, but Mr. Taphouse was too quick for him. You may well ask, he said. Every window is shuttered to that quality, and no one tells me why. I don't ask. I never ask. Just do what I'm told. Doesn't mean I don't wonder. The old man lifted the frame and stood it against the wall with several others. The stained glass windows, too? Asked Malcolm. Not them yet. I think the sisters believe they're too precious. They reckon no one would try and damage them. So these are for protection? Malcolm sounded incredulous, and he felt it, too. Who on earth would want to hurt the nuns or break their windows? That's my best guess, said Mr. Taphouse, putting a chisel back in its rack on the wall. But, Malcolm couldn't think of how to finish. But who'd threaten the sisters? I know. That's the question. I can't answer it. There's something up, though. They're afraid of something. I thought it felt a bit funny in there just now, said Malcolm. Well, that's it. Has it anything to do with with the baby? Who knows? Her father's made himself a nuisance to the church in his time. Lord Asriel, that's it. But you want to keep your nose out of that sort of thing. There's some things it's dangerous to talk about. Why? I mean, in what way? That's enough. When I say that's enough, that's enough. Don't be cheeky. Mr. Taphouse's demon, a ragged-looking woodpecker, clacked her beak crossly. Malcolm said no more, but swept up the shavings and the sawdust and tipped them into the bin next to the offcuts, from which Mr. Taphouse would feed the old iron stove the next day. "Good night, Mr. Taphouse," said Malcolm as he left. The old man grunted and said nothing. Having finished the body in the library, Malcolm returned to A Brief History of Time. It was harder going, but he expected it to be, and the subject was exciting, even if he didn't understand everything the author said about it. He wanted to finish it before Saturday, and just about managed it. Dr. Relf was replacing a broken pane of glass in her back door when he arrived. Malcolm was interested at once. "How did that happen?" he said. "Someone broke it. I bolted the door top and bottom, so they wouldn't have been able to get in anyways, but I think they were hoping the key was in the lock." "Have you got some putty? And some glazing sprigs?" "What are they?" "Little nails without heads that hold the glass in place." "I thought the putty did that." "Not by itself. I can go and get some for you." There was an ironmonger's in Walton Street, about 5 minutes' walk away, which was one of Malcolm's favorite places after the chandlery. He'd cast a quick glance at Dr. Relf's tools, and she had everything else necessary, so it wasn't long before he returned with a little bag of glazing sprigs. I saw, Mr. Taphouse doing this once at the Priory. He's the carpenter," he explained. "What he did was, look, I'll show you." To avoid bashing the glass with the hammer as he tapped the glazing sprig into the frame, he put the sprig along the glass with its point in the wood, and then held the side of the chisel against the other end of it so he could tap the hammer against that to drive it home. "Oh, that's clever," said Dr. Relf. "Let me have a go." When he was sure she wouldn't break the glass, Malcolm finished while he softened and warmed the putty. "Should I have a putty knife?" she said. "No, an ordinary eating knife will do. One with a round end is best." He'd never actually done it himself, but he remembered what Mr. Taphouse has done, and the result was perfectly neat. "Wonderful," she said. "You have to let it dry and get a bit of skin before you can paint it," he said. "Then it'll be all weatherproof and everything." "Well, I think we deserve a cup of chocolatl now," she said. "Thank you very much, Malcolm." "I'll tidy up," he said. That was what Mr. Taphouse would have expected. Malcolm imagined him watching, giving a stern nod when everything was put away and swept up. "I've got 2 things to tell you," he said when they were sitting down by the fire in the little sitting room. "Good. It might not be good. You know the Priory where they're looking after the infant, the baby? Well, Mr. Taphouse is making some heavy shutters to go over all their windows. He doesn't know why. He doesn't ask why anything. But they're so heavy and strong. When I was there the other day, the sisters were kind of anxious, and I found him making the shutters. You could do with some here. Mr. Taphouse said the nuns were probably afraid of something, but he couldn't guess what it was. I don't know if I asked him the right questions. Maybe I should have asked if one of the windows had been broken, but I didn't think of that. Never mind. That is interesting. Do you think they were protecting the baby?" "Bound to be, partly. But they got all sorts of things to protect there, like crucifixes and statues and silver and stuff. If it was just burglars they were worried about, though, I don't know if they'd bother with the sort of shutters that Mr. Taphouse is making. So maybe they're worried about the baby mostly. I'm sure they would be. Sister Benedicta told me that it was Lord Nugent, the ex-Lord Chancellor of England, who decided to put the baby there. She didn't say why, and sometimes she gets cross if I keep on asking. And she said the baby was confidential as well. But so many people know about her already, I thought it wouldn't much matter. I expect you're right. What was the other thing? Oh, yes. Malcolm told her what Eric's father, the clerk of the court, had passed on about the man in the canal. Her face grew pale. "Good God, that's appalling," she said. "You think it might be true?" "Oh, well, don't you?" "The thing is, Eric does exaggerate a bit." "Oh? He likes to show off about what he knows, what his dad's heard in court. I wonder if his dad would have told him that sort of thing." "Yes, I think he would. I've heard him talk like that about things that have happened, trials and such. I think he'd be telling the truth to Eric. But maybe Eric, I don't know, though. I just think that poor man, he looked so unhappy." To Malcolm's intense embarrassment, his voice shook, his throat tightened, and he found tears flowing from his eyes. When he when he'd been moved to tears at home, when he was much younger, his mother had known what to do. She gathered him into her arms and rocked him gently till the crying faded away. Malcolm realized that he wanted to cry about the dead man since the moment he'd heard about him, but of course he couldn't possibly tell his mother any of this. "Sorry," he said. "Malcolm, don't say sorry. I'm sorry that you're mixed up in this. Actually, now, I think we'd better stop. I've got no business asking you to. I don't want to stop. I want to find out. It's too dangerous. If anyone thinks you know anything about this, then you're in real. I know. But I am anyway. I can't help it. It certainly ain't your fault. I'd have seen all those things even if it weren't for you. And at least I can talk to you. I couldn't talk to anyone else, not even Sister Fenella. She wouldn't understand at all." He was still embarrassed, and you could tell that Dr. Rolfe was embarrassed too, because she hadn't known what to do. He wouldn't have wanted her to embrace him, so he was glad she hadn't tried to do that, at least, but it was still an awkward little moment. "Well, promise me you won't ask anything," she said. "Yeah, all right, I can promise that," he said, meaning it. "I won't start any asking, but if someone else says something, well, use your judgment. Try not to seem interested. And we'd better get on and do what our cover story says we're doing, and talk about books. What did you think of those two?" Malcolm had never had a conversation like the one that followed. At school, in a class of 40, there was no time for such a thing, even if the curriculum allowed it, even if the teachers had been interested. At home, it wouldn't have happened because neither his father nor his mother was a reader. In the bar, he was a listener rather than a participant, and the only two friends with whom he might have spoken seriously about such things, Robbie and Tom, had none of the breadth of learning and the depth of understanding that he found when Dr. Ralph spoke. At first, Asta sat close on his shoulder, where she'd gone as a little ferret when he had found himself crying, but little by little she felt easier, and before long she was sitting beside Jesper, the kind-faced marmoset, having their own quiet exchange while The Body in the Library was discussed, and A Brief History of Time touched on with wary respect. You said last time that you were a historian of ideas, said Malcolm. An historian. What sort of ideas did you mean? Like the ones in this book? Yes, largely, she said. Ideas about big things, such as the universe, and good and evil, and why things exist in the first place. I never thought about why they did, said Malcolm, wondering. I never thought you could think things like that. I thought things just were. So people thought different things about him in the past? Oh, yes. And there were times when it was dangerous to think the wrong things, or at least to talk about them. It is now, sort of. Yes, I'm afraid you're right. But as long as we keep to what's been published, I don't think you and I will get into much trouble. Malcolm wanted to ask about the secret things she was involved with, and whether they were part of the history of ideas, but he felt that it was better to stick to books for now. So he asked if she had any more books about experimental theology, and she found him one called The Strange Story of the Quantum. And then she let him scan the shelves of murder mysteries, and he picked out another by the author of The Body in the Library. You got lots of hers, he said. Not as many as she wrote. How many books have you read? Thousands. I couldn't possibly guess. Do you remember them all? No. I remember the very good ones. Most of my murders and thrillers aren't very good in that way, so if I let a little time go by, I find I've forgotten them and I can read them again. That's a good idea, he said. I probably better go now. If I hear anything else, I'll save it up and tell you. And if you get another broken window, well, you can probably mend it by yourself. Now I showed you about the glazing sprigs. Thank you, Malcolm, she said, and please, once more, be careful. That evening, Hannah didn't go to the college for dinner as usual. Hannah, the doctor we were just talking about. Instead, she took a note to the porter's lodge at Jordan College and went home to make herself some scrambled eggs. Then she drank a glass of wine and waited. At 9:20, there was a knock at the door, and she opened it at once and let in the man who was waiting outside in the rain. I'm sorry to bring you out on a night like this, she said. Sorry to be brought, he said. Never mind. What's this about? His name was George Papadimitriou, and he was the professor of Byzantine history who had first recruited her for Oakley Street 2 years before. He was also the tall, scholarly-looking man who had had dinner with Lord Nugent at the Trout. She took his coat and shook off the worst of the rain before hanging it on the radiator. I've done something stupid, she said. That's not like you. I'll have a glass of whatever that is. Go on, then. Tell me. His green-finched demon touched noses courteously with Jesper, and then perched on the back of his chair as he sat down by the fire with his wine. Hannah filled her own glass again and sat down in the other chair. She took a deep breath and told him about Malcolm, the acorn, her asking the alethiometer, the trout, the books. She edited it very carefully, but she told him everything he needed to know. He listened in silence. His dark, heavy-eyed face was serious and still. I read about the man in the canal, he said. Naturally, I didn't know he was your insulator. I hadn't heard about the strangling either. Any chance that this is just a child's fantasy? It could be, of course, but not Malcolm's. I believe him. If it's a fantasy, it's his friend's. It won't be reported in the press, of course. Unless it's not the CCD behind it. Then they won't be afraid, and it won't be censored. He nodded. He hadn't wasted time agreeing with her that she'd been stupid and chastising her for it and threatening reprisals. All his intellect was focused now on dealing with the situation, with this curious boy in the position she'd put him in. Well, he could be useful, you know, he said. I know he could be useful. I saw that from the start. I'm just angry with myself for putting him at risk. As long as you cover it all, there won't be much risk to him. Well, it's affecting him. When he was telling me about the strangling, he found himself crying. Natural in a young child. He's a sensitive boy. There's something else. He's very close to the nuns of the Godstow Priory, just across the river from the Trout. And it seems that they're looking after the child who was the subject of that court case, the daughter of Lord Asriel. Papadimitriou nodded. You knew about it? She went on. Yes. In fact, I was discussing the matter with two colleagues in the room at the Trout. And it was your Malcolm who was serving us. That'll teach me a lesson. So it was you and the Lord Chancellor? Was he right about that? What did he tell you? She went over it briefly. What an observant boy, he said. He's an only child, and I think he was fascinated by the baby. She's, I don't know, 6 months old or thereabouts. Who else knows she's there? The boy's parents, I suppose. Presumably some of the customers of the pub, the villagers, servants. It didn't seem to be a secret. Normally a child would be in the care of its mother, but in this case the woman didn't want it and said so. Custody would then fall to the father, but the court forbade it on the grounds that he was not a fit person. No, it's not a secret, but it might become important. One more thing, said Hannah. She told him about the CCD men who tried to arrest George Boatwright, and their interest in the men who had been in the Trout. That must have been you and Lord Nugent, she said, but they were asking about another man. There were 3 of us, said Papa Demetrio. He finished the wine. Another glass, she said. No, thank you. Don't call me again like this. The porter at Jordan is gossip. If you want to contact me, put a card on the notice board outside the History Faculty Library saying simply Candle. That will be a signal to go to the next evensong at Wykeham. Wykheham. Wykeham. I shall be sitting alone. You will sit next to me and we can talk quietly under the music. Candle, I understand. And if you want to contact me, if I do, you will know about it. I think you did well to recruit this boy. Look after him. End of chapter 6. Alright, time to refill my water and take a nice drink. One sec. Glad to hear the stream didn't freeze. That would be unfortunate. Sorry to hear your browser froze, though. You're missing, clearly, a most interesting story. I'm enjoying it. Chapter 7. Too Soon. The headquarters of the Secret Service that employed Hannah Relf was known to its agents as Oakley Street for the simple reason that respectable Chelsea thoroughfare was nowhere near it and had nothing to do with it at all. That was not known to Hannah, though. She had never been to the headquarters of the service, and as far as she was aware, the words Oakley Street, wherever that was, meant no more than a straightforward address. Apart from Professor Papadimitriou, although almost her only contact with the service was the acorn. She gathered it with its query, and left it with her reply, in one of a number of different hiding places that Oakley Street called left luggage boxes. The person who left it for her and took it away again, the late Mr. Luckhurst, was known as an insulator. Neither of them knew the other, which meant that they wouldn't be able to reveal anything if questioned. The one other way of talking to Oakley Street was through a cataloger at the Bodleian Library. What she had to do was submit a query about a catalog number of a particular book, which would tell him that she wanted to pass a message to the service. The book didn't matter, but the author's name did. The first letter was a surname of the surname was a code that indicated the matter she wanted to talk about. Accordingly, she submitted her query on the official form, and the following day she received a note inviting her to meet the care logger, Harry Dibdin, in his office at 11 a.m. Dibdin was a thin, sandy-colored man, whose demon was a bird of some tropical kind she didn't know. He shut the door and lifted a pile of books off the visitor's chair before offering her a cup of coffee. Cataloging queries can take time, he said, and we always pay scrupulous attention to the views of distinguished scholars. In that case, I'd like some coffee, thank you, she said. He plugged in an Anbaric kettle and fussed with some cups. You can talk in here with perfect confidence, he said. No one can hear us at all. You wanted to contact Oakley Street. What's it about? My insulator has been murdered. I'm pretty sure of that. By the CCD. For the time being, I have no way of contacting my clients. She meant the 4 or 5 Oakley Street officers who sent her questions in the Acorn. Murdered, said Dibdin. How do you know? She told him the story. By the time she'd finished, he had poured the coffee and handed her a cup. If you'd like milk, I'll have to go hunt for some. I've got sugar, though. Black is fine, thank you. Are your clients in a hurry? He said, sitting down. His demon fluttered an exotic tail and settled on his shoulder. If they were in a hurry, they wouldn't be consulting the alethiometer. But, she said, but it's not something I want to postpone if I can help it. Quite. Are you sure that Oakley Street doesn't know about your insulator? No, I'm not sure of anything. But when a system that's worked for 18 months suddenly goes wrong, you're worried that he might have given away what he might have given away before they killed him? Of course. He doesn't know me, but he knows where all the left luggage boxes were, and they could watch them. How many did you use? 9. In strict rotation. 9. In strict rotation? No, there was a code which... Don't tell me what it was. But it meant you could pick up a drop in message or go straight to the right box, and he'd do the same? Yes. Well, 9. They won't have enough agents to watch 9 boxes 24 hours a day. Wouldn't do any harm to find some new ones, though. Let Oakley Street know through me where they are. And if the insulator didn't know you, you're in no danger. So, for the moment, do nothing more than look for the new boxes. When Oakley Street's put a new insulator in place, I'll let you know. Thanks, she said. Actually, there was something else I was wondering about. Go on. Is the Lord Chancellor, Lord Nugent, ex-Lord Chancellor, an Oakley Street man? Dibdin blinked, and his demon shuffled her feet. I don't know, he said. Yes, you do. And by the way he reacted, I can tell that he is. I didn't say that. Not in so many words. Here's another question. What's the significance of the child of a man called Lord Asriel and a woman called Mrs. Coulter? He said nothing for several seconds. Then he rubbed his jaw, and his demon chirped something quietly in his ear. What do you know about a child? He said. That child is in the care of some nuns at Godstow. She's a baby, 6 months old or so. Why is Lord Nugent interested in her? I can't imagine. How do you know he is? I think he was responsible for getting her placed there. Perhaps he's afraid of the parents. Not everything's connected to Oakley Street, you know. No, you're probably right. Thanks for the coffee. A pleasure, he said, opening the door for her. Any time. As she made her way back to do Comfrey, she resolved never to mention Oakley Street to Malcolm. He didn't need to know anything about that. And she would have to subdue the guilt she felt about asking him to spy. There was nothing about the business that was comfortable. Nothing at all. A new person. This is gonna be another PB? Almost certainly. No, I checked during the break. I'm like 50 ahead. Um, I was challenged. Challenge was okay. I think it was a mid 2 again. It was slightly better than last run. Nothing stellar and nothing terrible. The main thing I need to fix is redoing some splits. Also, hi Cruiser 5. Welcome to The Witness. Clearly you're somewhat familiar with it, so you've either seen previous runs or I've simply forgotten your name, for which I apologize. Where were we? Ah, yes. Malcolm spent some time helping Mr. Taphouse with the shutters. He liked the new Amberic drill very much, and when Mr. Taphouse, after much pestering, let him try it, he liked it even more. They put up all the shutters that Mr. Taphouse had to offer, and then went back to the workshop to make some more. Had to pay a fortune for this oak, the man grumbled. Sister Benedicta doesn't like paying so much, but I says to her a deal's a deal and oak's oak, and she saw the sense in the end. It's only as strong as the fixing anyway, said Malcolm, who had heard Mr. Taphouse say those words many times. Yeah, but big wood like this will hold a big fixing. It'll take a long time with a screwdriver to get all the screws out the wall. I was thinking, said Malcolm, about these screws, right? You know when a slot gets worn away, it's much harder to undo because the screwdriver can't bite? Well, about it. Well, suppose we filled the head of the screw so you could do it up and not undo it. Malcolm put the screw in the vise and filed away part of the head to show him Mr. Taphouse what he meant. See, you can turn to screw it in, but there's nothing to lean against if you want to unscrew it. Oh, yeah, it's a good idea, Malcolm. A very good idea. But suppose Sister Benedicta changed her mind next year and tells me we gotta take 'em all down again. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, let me know when you have, said the old man. His demon cackled. Malcolm wasn't put out. He liked this idea and thought it could work on it to improve it. He put the next screw in his top pocket and helped Mr. Taphouse with the next shutter. You're going to varnish them, Mr. Taphouse? He said. No, Danish oil, boy. Best thing there is. You know what you got to watch out for with Danish oil? No. What? Spontaneous combustion, the old man said roundly. You put it on with a rag, see? And if you don't soak the rag in water after you finish and dry it flat, it'll catch fire all by itself. What did you call it? Spontaneous combustion. Malcolm said it again for the pleasure of it. After the carpenter had gone home, Malcolm went to the priory kitchen to talk to Sister Fenella. The old nun was cutting up a cabbage, and Malcolm took a knife and helped her. Where have you been up to, Malcolm? What have you been up to, Malcolm? She said, helping Mr. Taphouse. You know these shutters he's making, Sister Fenella? Why are you having shutters put up? It was some advice we had from the police, she said. They came and saw Sister Benedicta and told her there'd been a lot of burglaries in Oxford recently, and they thought of all the silver and plate and precious vestments and so on, and advised us to put up some extra protection. Not for the baby, then? Well, it'll protect her as well, of course. How is she? Oh, she's very lively. Can I see her again? If there's time. I made her a present. Oh, Malcolm, that's kind. I've got it here. I always carry it, just in case I can see her. Well, that's very good of you. Can I see her? Well, all right. Have you done that cabbage? Yes, look. Come along, then. She put her knife down and wiped her hands, and led him down the corridor to the room where they'd been. The crib stood in the middle of the floor, and one gloomy lamp was all the illumination in the room, so the baby was in semi-darkness. She was making all kinds of baby noises to her demon, who stood on his hind legs as a rat,
and stared at Sister Fenella and Malcolm before fleeing to the pillow and making chirping noises into Lyra's ear. She's teaching him to talk, Malcolm said. With the greatest of care, Sister Fenella lifted her up, and Lyra's rat demon leapt onto her tiny shoulder and became a shrew. Malcolm took out a present. It was the lanyard he'd made, tied into a little ball of beechwood that he's rounded and sanded carefully. He'd consulted his mother, who had said, as long as it's too big to swallow, it's probably safe. I was going to paint it, he said to Sister Fenella, but I know babies chew things, and there's all kinds of stuff in paint that might not be good for her, so I sanded it as smooth as I could. She won't get splinters or anything, and if she swallows the lanyard, you can use the ball to pull it out again. It's really safe. Oh, it's lovely, Malcolm. Look, Lyra, it's a block of, what is it? Beech. See, you can tell by the grain, it's really smooth, and the way it's tied, it'll never come off. Lyra seized the lanyard at once and put it in her mouth. She likes it. She might. I don't know. If she tries to swing, she might choke. I suppose that's a possibility, Malcolm granted reluctantly. Maybe she'll have to wait and have it later. Or else you could bring her crib in the kitchen, and if she started to make choking noises, you could save her right away. I bet her demon'd make a racket if she started to choke. What's his name? Pentalinement? Yeah, Pentalinement. He could probably pull it out. It's not safe, said Asta firmly. Give it to her when she's older. Oh, well, said Malcolm, and he tried to take the lanyard away gently. Lyra didn't care for that and started to object. But then Malcolm pretended to get hiccups, and she laughed so much she forgot the lanyard and let go. Can I hold her? He said. Better sit down first, said Sister Fenella. He sat on an upright chair and held out his arms, and Sister Fenella lay Lyra very carefully on his lap. Her little demon scampered up and down to avoid touching Malcolm, but Lyra herself was intrigued by this change of perspective and gazed calmly around, and then focused her eyes on Malcolm herself. That's Malcolm, said Sister Fenella in a soft, bright voice. You like Malcolm, don't you? Malcolm felt that, nice as the old nun was, she didn't know the best way of speaking to a baby. He looked down at a little face and said, Now see, Lyra, I made you that lanyard and the beechwood ball, but you're not old enough for it yet. That was my fault. I didn't think you'd probably choke on the lanyard. Well, you might not, but it's too dangerous at the moment. So I'll keep it till you're old enough to play with that without stuffing it in your mouth all the time. When you're old enough, I'll show you how to make one. It's quite easy when you know how. I made it with a cotton cord, but you could use anything. Twine, marline. I'll take you for a ride in La Belle Sauvage when you're a bit older. How's that? That's my boat. I suppose you better learn to swim first. We'll do that in the summer, all right? I think she's still a little young. I think she'd still be a little young. That's actually a typo, said Sister Fenella, and then stopped because they heard voices in the corridor. Quick, she whispered, and took the baby from Malcolm's arm just as the door opened. Oh, what is this boy doing here? The speaker was a woman with tightly rolled gray hair and a hard face. She was not a nun. But the dark blue suit she wore looked like a uniform of some kind, and in the lapel was a small enamel badge showing a gold lamp with a little red flame coming out of it. Sister Fenella, said Sister Benedicta, entering behind her. Oh, well, Malcolm, this is Malcolm. I know who Malcolm is. What are you doing? I made a present for the baby, and I asked Sister Fenella if I could give it to her. Let me see, said the stranger. She examined the wooden ball and the soggy string with some distaste. Not at all suitable. Take it away. And you, young man, go home. This is none of your business. When Lyra heard the woman's harsh tone, her face crumpled, and her demon burrowed her face into her neck, and she began to cry quietly. Bye, Lyra, Malcolm said and squeezed her little hand. Bye, Sister Fenella. Thank you, Malcolm, the old nun managed to say, and Malcolm noticed how frightened she was. Sister Benedicta took Lyra away from Sister Fenella, and the last thing Malcolm heard as he left the priory was the baby wailing properly. That was something else to tell Dr. Relf, he thought. Do I want to read another chapter? Not really. 2 is usually the sanity limit, or else I run the risk of missing this. We'll resume probably tomorrow with chapter 8. Spoken before, no hard feelings. Hello, Exto. Did you do more, whatchamacallit this run? That, I didn't say that right. Did you run more Talos today? Or are you on temporary leave from Talos, having achieved your goal? Yeah. I can't speak, don't worry about it. Yes, you did. Or yes, you understand what I mean. Got a 10:03 Messenger. Oh, you're doing Messenger. Did you see Apple's paint prediction stuff? Yeah, I assume you were gonna run Messenger or Eternalize Unrestricted. It's actually like 40 seconds slower. Really? That's dumb. So it's really only relevant for like community percent shenanigans? Dang, that sucks. I was hoping that any percent could be less terrible. I guess I should look into paint seeds again. Blech. I don't want to do that. I guess I should unmute the game now.
Lists hundreds of everyday words and phrases which made their first appearance in the pages of the Bard. Addiction, alligator, assassination, bedroom, critic.
The record is a low 9
design, dialogue,
for Messenger.
employer,
I don't actually remember.
film,
It's been too
glow,
long.
gloomy, gossip, hint, hurry, investment, lonely, luggage, manager, switch, torture, transcendence, wormhole.
9:36. Okay, I'm mid
zany.
9.
Hamlet alone
Okay.
contains nearly 40 of these neologisms. Who today would have this audacity?
Are you comparing
this
against
giddy
record splits
exuberance
or
of
against your own
invention?
splits?
Only one other
Yeah,
English
worst
author
Nexus Paint is
even
terrible.
approaches
I know that.
Shakespeare's facility for coining new words.
Oh yeah,
Sir
do you
Francis
need
Bacon.
what split skips? What
the
what
modern era,
world
the
skips do
record
you
holder
need
is
for
Charles
any
Dodson,
percent?
better
Assuming
known
you're
as
doing
Lewis
per
Carroll,
sigil splits.
who, interestingly, also happens to be the second most quoted author in English, after Shakespeare. Everyone has been profoundly
Oh,
molded
you don't mean
by
20%.
the influences of the King
Okay.
James Bible and Shakespeare.
Only needs A6? Okay.
Like it or not, all of us peer at
Which
the
is already
world
in there. That would explain
through
why
the
A6 is in
lenses
there, I
of
guess.
These great works. They
Okay,
are
I
the
should-
primary source documents of modern
really should do
English
that.
thought, the style guides of our minds. Contemplating these dazzling jewels of wisdom and eloquence gives rise to an extraordinary
I should also
feeling,
fix the whatever broke
a
with
potent, rare, and precious emotion
the
with
text
the potential
display.
to completely upset your life.
I don't know what broke with the text
An
display. I don't know how
emotion
many people even
powerful
use the
enough
text
to make
display,
a man abandon his wife and children, forfeit career and reputation, lay down his possessions, and follow his heart.
Oh yeah, and you wanted me to try and get a
without
show
question.
achievement count.
That
I guess I could try and do that too.
Sweet fusion of wonder and fear, irresistible attraction, and soul-numbing dread known as awe. Awe.
There's
is the
apparently a
grail
less
of
hacky way of
artistic
doing it.
achievement.
You think it'd be funny, yeah?
No
That's fair.
other human
There's
emotion
probably a less
possesses
hacky way
such
of doing it than the
broad,
way I do it right now.
transformative power,
No, I know, but it's
and
one of those
none
things
is
where
more
once I sort of
difficult
switch
to
attention
evoke.
to a different auto splitter, it's easy to do
Few
a bunch
and
of things
far
to it at
between
once, rather than to
are the
try and do
works of
like one
men
thing now and two
that
things later.
qualify as truly awesome. It is awe that convinces a rabbi to spend a lifetime decoding Yahweh from the Pentateuch. Awe that sends millions of visitors each year to the pyramids of Giza, Guadalupe, and Mecca. It was awe that drove poor Delia Bacon to her doom. Now, please don't come away from this lecture thinking that the key to awesome game design is the installation of Easter eggs. Ordinary games with their contrived Easter eggs and cheat codes are like the Battery of the Month Club. You have to trudge down to the back of the store to get what you really came for. If superpower is what people really want, why not just give it to them? Is our imagination so impoverished that we have to resort to marketing gimmicks to keep players interested in our games? Awesome things
I think
don't hold anything
Talos
back.
seems to believe
Awesome things
This
are
speech is
rich
very interested with
and
context to
generous.
Talos, right?
The
So, like,
treasure is
for
right
example,
there.
there's a jetpack in Talos,
One afternoon,
which ties like
I was
directly to
sitting
this.
alone
So,
behind the
if you
counter of
think
that
that
old
Talos is
Radio
more
Shack
fun with the
store.
jetpack,
My boss
then
stepped out for some
you
reason.
believe what Moriarty has to
An
say, which is that
elderly
that's a
woman
bad kind of
walked
Easter
through
egg.
the front door.
But in my mind, Talos
Like
with the
most of our
jetpack is actually a
customers,
really
she
dumb
was
game.
shabbily dressed,
Because you just fly to every
probably
single
from a
sigil. Like,
fixed
none of them
income.
are encased in boxes.
I assumed she was there for her free battery.
It's actually one of the reasons
But
why we
instead,
can
she placed a
cheat
portable
absolutely everything in the
radio
game.
on the counter.
But
This little radio came from the days
I think Talos
when
thinks
they
that
boasted
Easter
about the
eggs are a
number
good
of
way to reward
transistors
exploration.
inside on the case. It was
And
completely
Talos is
wrapped
more
in
references than
dirty
Easter
white
eggs, right? So,
medical
like,
tape. The woman looked at
yeah,
me
yeah,
and
but that's what I'm
asked,
saying, right? If you
"Can
think
you
that
fix
C3 would
this?"
be more fun with the jetpack,
Slowly, I
then
unwrapped
you believe
the
Moriarty's
medical
point, which is that
tape,
this
peeling
is a
away
bad
the
Easter egg.
layers until
This is
the
a
back cover of the
contrived
radio fell
sort
off,
of God mode in the
accompanied
game.
by a cloud of red dust. The interior of the radio
May fall
half
asleep
eaten
involuntarily.
away by
Hope it
battery
goes well.
leakage
All
and
right,
corrosion.
no worries. You'll see the
I
time
looked at the
in
radio.
Speedrun.com if it gets to
I looked
PV,
at the old woman.
but you probably will. I don't think there's
I
much
looked
that can
back
go
at the
wrong at this
radio.
point.
I reached behind me, where the expensive alkaline batteries were hanging like prescription medication, and removed a gleaming 9-volt cell from its gold blister pack. Then I pulled
But
a
like,
brand new
I guess there are a
transistor
few
radio
functional
from a
Easter
box,
eggs in Talos,
installed the
like the
alkaline,
one in
and
B7,
helped
for
the lady
example, the
find her
cat.
favorite station.
Those are
woman
the things
changed
which start
hands.
bordering on like,
She left the
why
store
are these in the
without
game?
saying a
These do
word.
not feel like the sort of thing that should be an Easter egg.
Awesome things are kind of like that.
Like you're gating content behind something secret.
Bach offered his students very specific insight into the source of awe. In addition to BACH, 2 other sets of initials are also associated with Bach's music. These initials are not hidden in the notes. Instead, they're scrawled right across the top of the manuscript for the whole world to see. The initials are SDG and JJ. SDG stands for the Latin phrase Sole Deo Gloria, to the glory of God alone. JJ stands for Jesu Juva, help me, Jesus. Bach wrote all of his great masterpieces sub specie aeternitatis, under the aspect of eternity. He did not compose only to please his sponsors or to win the approval of an audience. His work was his worship. Bach once wrote, "Music should have no other end and aim than the glory of God and the recreation of the soul. Where this is not kept in mind, there
Let's see,
is
I need
no
to change
true
splits
music,
in 2 places.
but only an infernal clamor.
Quarry, I wanted to
and
swap up
ranting.
for Fast Quarry. I want to move Cloud Cycle to be
The
after
name
Bunker,
of the
I think.
power that moves you is not important. What is important
Sketchy as that feels, I was
is that
early
you
for it this
are
run, which is
moved.
bad, so I guess that's correct.
Awe is
Um,
the foundation of religion.
Mountain should be fine.
No other motivation can free you
I want to
from the
test Bodhi
limits
Peas when I get done.
personal achievement. Nothing else can teach you
And then I guess I want to
the
fix
art
Battle Block
of
Splitter,
flight.
which is fine.
Computer games are barely 40 years old. Only a few words in our basic vocabulary have been established. A whole dictionary is waiting to be coined. The slate is clean. Someday soon, perhaps even in our lifetime, a game design will appear that will flash across our culture like lightning. It will be easy to recognize. It will be generous.
Fast Quarry? Yeah, I did Fast Quarry
giddy
this
with
run.
exuberant
Apparently it was important because I made the Bodhi P by
Scholars
like
will pick it apart
a second
for decades.
or less.
Perhaps
I'm doing Fast Quarry
centuries.
again just because of how tight the
It will
CP
be
is.
something
And Fast Quarry
wonderful.
feels more free in the new version.
Something
It's a shame. I really didn't want to have to
terrifying.
do it, but like I do have to
Something
play really well to get that
awful.
early buoy,
A few
and
years
I think
ago,
every second is
I was
relevant.
invited to speak at a conference in London. My wife joined me, and we took a day off for some sightseeing. we decided to visit England's second biggest tourist attraction, Stratford upon Avon. It was cold and rainy when our train arrived. Luckily, most of the attractions are just a short walk from the station. We visited Shakespeare's birthplace, a charming old house along the main street, which attracts millions of pilgrims every year, despite the complete lack of any evidence that Shakespeare was born there or even lived anywhere near it. We went past the school where Shakespeare learned to read and write, although no documents exist to prove his attendance. We visited Anne Hathaway's cottage, the rustic country farm where his wife spent her childhood, although no
I still wanna
record
do
shows
more research
anyone
in
by
this
that
game, though.
name ever having lived there.
But I think my research in this
Finally,
game is going to
we came
take
to the
weeks
one
to months,
location
so I'm happy to
undeniably associated
switch
with
context to either
Shakespeare,
Talos or to Battle Block
Trinity
this
Parish
evening.
Church,
And then I want
on
to
the
work
banks
on
of the River Avon,
Batman
where
after
a
that,
man by that name is buried.
because I hate leaving people out to dry for this
This
stuff.
beautiful church is approached by a long walkway between rows
So I'll
of
play
ancient
with that some more.
gravestones, shaded by tall trees. The entrance door is surprisingly tiny. No cameras are allowed inside. The interior is dark and quiet.
It's another like 10 minutes.
Despite the presence of busloads
Blech.
of tourists, the atmosphere is hushed and respectful. A few people are seated in the pews.
Yeah,
deep
it's
in
midnight
prayer.
Eastern. I'm not surprised people are
An
leaving.
aisle
That's
leads
okay.
up the center of the church.
It's late. It's a
The
weekday.
left side of the altar is brightly illuminated. On the wall above is a famous bust of the bard, quill in hand, gazing serenely at the crowd of pilgrims. On the floor beneath, surrounded by bouquets of flowers, at the very spot where Delia Bacon lost her mind, the gravestone of William Shakespeare bears this dire warning. Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man who spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Every year, 3 million pilgrims arrive from every nation on earth to approach this stone and consider the likeness of a man whose body of work can only be described as awesome. By contrast, the right side of the altar
excuse
is
me.
dark and
Should not hit my
featureless.
mic.
Nobody of any consequence is buried there.
Oh, seeing the
The only
clips.
point
Yeah,
of
it's still a
interest
little
is a
while.
wooden case
The
of
most
simple
boring
design,
thing.
carved
Swear.
of dark oak. Inside the case, sealed beneath a thick sheet of glass, lies a large open book.
Ugh.
A plaque on the case
Just fair warning,
identifies this book as
when
a
I
first
actually
edition
am going
of the
for a
King
115,
James Bible,
215,
published in 1611.
that's up
when
215,
Shakespeare was 46.
I'm going to be sitting through Eclipse
Not
and not
many
muting the
pilgrims
game
visit
because
this
I
side of the
don't
altar.
want, I like
Most of
having
those that
my
do simply glance at the
PBs
book,
have
read the
game
plaque,
audio only
and move
for
along.
YouTube, with a link to the
few,
commentary
more
video,
observant,
just because I really
Note
hate,
that the Bible happens
I,
to be
I like
open
watching
to a
runs
page
sometimes
in
that
the
have no
Old
audio,
Testament,
especially if I'm going to link them
the
for
book
someone
of
for a
Psalms,
tutorial. Like if
chapter
I'm talking about who
46.
the hell knows what, and that's
No
in the middle of
explanation
someone
is
trying to
given
understand what's
for
going
this
on, they're
particular
often just going to have to
choice
mute
of
the game,
pages.
and I'd rather let them listen
For
to
the
the audio because
initiated,
every additional
None
cue
is necessary.
is useful.
If you are of
Yeah, no, the problem is
inquisitive
that my mic
mind,
is, it's a headset mic, and
If you
so
are
every time I reach up
intrigued
my
by
left hand
English
to do
history
anything with my,
and
like, my
literature,
eye or my face, I can hit it,
if you value your
and
peace of
it's
mind,
loud. I don't like
cover
doing it.
your ears now. In the year 1900, a scholar noticed something about the King James translation of Psalm 46. Something terrifying. Something wonderful. The 46th word from the beginning of Psalm 46 is shake. The 46th word from the end is spear. There are only two possibilities here. Either this is the finest coincidence ever recorded in the history of world literature, or it is not. The Earth revolves around only one sun and has only one moon. The moon happens to be 400 times smaller than the sun. The sun happens to be 400 times farther away. And the apparent paths of the moon and sun in our
It's an interesting
sky
thing that he
happen
says. He
to
basically says,
intersect
right, like,
exactly
here's this
twice
ridiculous
every month.
coincidence, right? King
Which
James
means
Bible
that
is
every
compiled by
now and
46
then,
editors,
at
46
long
years after
yet
Shakespeare's birth,
precisely
and
predictable
Psalm
intervals,
46, the 46th
the
word
lunar
from the
disk
beginning and end,
slips
makes his
across the
name,
face
right?
of the
Like,
sun.
5
It
things are
just
lining up. It's a
barely
ridiculous
conceals
coincidence.
it
He says, well,
for a
but
few
so are
wonderful,
solar eclipses, right?
terrible
Like, and
minutes.
we know that that's
Fine
not
coincidence.
intentional. So he says that there is a chance that this is just
In
luck.
June of
So, you know,
1977,
he's saying, I'm not
a
saying
little
anything
man
definitive here. We
with
have no proof.
divergent
It's just
eyes
highly
and a talent
suspicious.
for mischief, ascended a hilltop in the British village of Ampthill. At the summit of this hill is
And
a
then he
tall,
sort of
slender
brings us all back to
cross,
Easter eggs, how
a
a
memorial
really good
to
Easter
Catherine
egg
of
can be
Aragon,
extremely
the first
compelling,
wife
right?
of
That
Henry
a really
VIII.
good Easter egg for something like, say, the Shakespeare
sun,
mystery
high
is
in the
so
south,
compelling that people
cast
just,
the
like,
shadow of the
dive into
cross
it,
upon the
and it's
grassy
ridiculous.
hillside.
And that a
Exactly
good
12
Easter egg in a
noon,
game, or
the
like
man
this, a good
removed
Easter egg
from
in
his
real life
pocket
based on a
a
book, can
bar
actually be
magnet.
extremely compelling for this
He
stuff.
turned the magnet
And
its
so he sort
north
of gives the
pole was
explanation of this
facing
Easter
south
egg to tell you
and
why
buried
this is such a
under the
gorgeous
shadow
setup.
of
Right, the
cross.
amount of work that's put into this
2
Easter egg,
years
the
later,
Kit Williams,
a few hours before the
Gilded
publication
Rabbit,
of his
is such a
first book,
complex thing, and that's
the
so
man
important
returned to
because
the
that's why
hillside,
it was such a compelling
this
thing, because
time
it's so well
in the
hidden.
dead of night.
But that then once you find
He
it, it's
used a
amazing.
compass to locate the magnet he had buried. In that same place, he dug a hole in the ground and placed inside a ceramic container inscribed with the following words: I am the keeper of the jewel of masquerade, which lies waiting safe inside me.
The longest damn EP, I swear. I mean, it is. It's just like, it's so frustratingly long.
Second-hand views of the world. Made
I guess I can
very
be a
advanced
little bit more aggressive about
by
this.
your
I'm wasting like
intelligence.
3 or 4 seconds here.
Things
Actually,
like
it's probably closer to 5.
as opposed to
Bunch of amino acids. That's what it is. Or geranium. Or you. I didn't check my windmill cycle. You can check it up here. Okay, I am gonna get an earlier lineup for windmill here. For once. I should be able to grab it at the front, I think. I'll be good to go short distance, let's say. I maybe could have made it across the bridge, but I don't want to take that risk. Oh yeah, I wanted to test something with the windmill as well. That was the thing I was going to do in town. Shouldn't be that hard to do. That positioning is drilled into my mind because that used to be the end of the run. A star at dawn, ladies and gentlemen. Right there. Around, please. It's interesting, all the lasers dim slightly when you solve an EP, just because there are a couple of EPs that go near lasers, and so they wanted to just make sure that you would never get confused by one bright light for another. Which I think is a really nice quality of life change. There's a lot of small things in this game that you don't quite realize until you speedrun it, that are just like really good considerations for casual players. I still don't get what the hell the deal is with them changing colors though. That throws me. Like they're all a slightly different color for some reason. I just don't know why. It's really odd. Just the very end of the run, followed by a nice little PB. I think. I was ahead during Eclipse, I checked on my phone. There is some risk of missing that if you take too long, but it's pretty minor. Like right around now, it would probably be invalid, but that's it. I have to slow down here because the CP sucks and is very precise, and if I go at max speed, I don't have enough ability to solve it, unfortunately. I wish I did. Practicing my tracking, of course. There is a world, the world where we task this game, Where, it's probably not even. It's possible to snipe that discarded panel up there, top left corner. It's just really terrible. I wouldn't want to do it, ever. It's also possible to solve some of these panels from the back. So close to being done, I know. I can feel it. And then I have to move all of my splits around again. Too far? A little bit too far. Not bad though. Yay. All of the things.